Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Joshua. Today we're beginning to look at Joshua chapter 9. Now, the campaign so far is going well. The Israelites are driving into the center part of the promised land, the land of Canaan. The two major battles are, of course, the conquering of Jericho and the conquering of Ai. They've also had that great moment of covenant renewal at Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. But the point is they're pretty much at this point in control of the center of the land. And that begins to elicit responses from the rest of the villages and cities and towns throughout Canaan. Now you remember I told you when we started this study that Canaan does not have a central government. They're not one united national area. Rather, there's various city-states and confederations throughout the land. However, they begin to form coalitions against the Israelites. Notice what happens, first part of chapter 9. Now, when all the kings west of the Jordan heard about these things refer to the conquering of Jericho, the conquering of Ai, the kings in the hill country, the kings in the western foothills, and those along the entire coast of the Mediterranean Sea as far as Babylon, the kings of the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, they came together to wage war against Joshua and Israel. So these other small kingdoms, these other city-states and areas began to realize these Israelites are truly a threat. There already been a fear of them, but now they're actually driving into the land. They're taking over large portions. They began to realize we're about to lose our place. And so they began to form coalitions or confederations. They began to make treaties with one another to battle their common enemy, which in their mind, of course, is the Israelites. So we see all these other kings beginning to talk to one another, saying, we better join forces. We better join forces to fight this Israelite invasion. It's going to make the coming battles a little more difficult, a little more treacherous to conquer the territory, because now you're going to be facing allied forces against you. But there's another city that takes a different approach, and that is the area around Gibeon. Now, if you look at a map, Gibeon would be the next logical target for the Israelites. They're driving westward across the land. They're taking the central portion. And after Ai, if you go a little bit further west and a little bit south, you're going to come to the city of Gibeon, a large city, a powerful city. It would logically be the next target. Gibeon knows this. But instead of joining a confederation against the Israelites, they decide we need to make a treaty with the Israelites themselves. We need to make a treaty with them, and we need to do it quickly. But how are we going to do that? So they decide on a course of deceit or to fool the Israelites. So notice what happens next. However, when the people of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to a ruse. They went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskins cracked and mended. They put worn and patched sandals on their feet. They wore old clothing. All the bread of their food supply was dry and moldy. And they went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal and said to him and to the Israelites, we have come from a distant country. Make a treaty with us. The Israelites said to these Hivites, but perhaps you live near to us. How can we make a treaty with you? So they come pretending to be from a far away country, a distant land. And they wear clothing that's worn out, and they make it look like all their supplies have endured long travel. Their food supplies are about gone. And we would like to make a treaty with you, but Israel is rather suspicious. Perhaps this is a trick, they say. Perhaps you actually live near to us. And they reply to Joshua, we're your servants. Joshua said, but who are you and where do you come from? They said, we have come from a very distant country because of the fame of the Lord your God. We've heard reports of your God, all that he did in Egypt and all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan. And our elders and those living in our country said to us, take provisions for your journey, go and meet them and say to them, we, your servants, make a treaty. This bread of ours was warm when we packed it at home. That's the day we left to come to you. But now see how dry and moldy it is? And these new wineskins, They were filled, they were new, but now they're cracked. You see that. And our clothing and sandals are worn out by the very long journey. So they present the evidence of their provisions. And it looked like they had come for a long way. So the Israelites sampled their provisions, but they did not inquire of the Lord. And so Joshua made a treaty of peace with them, agreed to let them live, and the leaders of the assembly ratified it by oath. The Israelites, at first they were suspicious, but after examining their clothing and their provisions, you have taken a long journey. And so they were fooled, and they made a treaty. Notice their mistake, however. They did not inquire of the Lord. They trusted in their own wisdom, in their own understanding, and did not inquire of the Lord. And thus they were led into a treaty by deceit. But they did make a treaty with Gibeon. Now, in tomorrow's session, we're going to see what happens when they find out they've been fooled. But Gibeon has deceived them, and they've entered into a binding treaty or a binding contract that they will not harm them. So what happens when they find out actually they were the next place on our journey? They were the next source to conquer. We'll see in tomorrow's session what the Israelites do when they discover they've been deceived. So join us next time for our 5-minute Bible study in the book of Joshua.